370,000 people live on an island created by volcanic fire in the middle of the North Atlantic, where the North American and Eurasian tectonic plates are tearing apart at a rate of 2 centimeters per year. Iceland is a geological laboratory where the Earth's processes happen at a speed and scale that make other landscapes seem static by comparison. With glaciers covering 11% of the land, while volcanoes erupt every 4 to 5 years on average. This is the country of fire and ice taken literally rather than as tourism marketing, where you can watch a geyser erupt every 8 minutes while standing on a lava field that was liquid rock within living memory, and where the northern lights sweep across winter skies in displays that are scientifically explainable but feel like magic regardless of how well you understand the physics. Subscribe to Passport Unfolded and see Iceland as it actually is, not as the Instagram filters show it. Reykjavik, the world's northernmost capital, contains 2/3 of Iceland's population in a city that feels more like a large town, with the historic center being entirely walkable. While the modern suburbs spread across lava fields that erupted centuries ago and have since been colonized by moss and birch scrub. The Hallgrímskirkja church dominates the skyline with its concrete tower designed to resemble the basalt columns that cover much of Iceland's coast. And the harbor area has been transformed from a working port into a cultural district where restaurants and museums and concert halls now occupy buildings that once served the fishing industry. The city is expensive by any global standard, with beer costing 10 euros and restaurant meals reaching prices that make visitors question their budget decisions. All driven by the small population, the remote location, and the strong currency that makes imports expensive. Golden Circle. The tourist route connects 3 major sites in a loop from Reykjavik that can be driven in a single day. And while the popularity creates crowds that diminish the experience, the geological significance justifies the visit regardless of how many tour buses fill the parking lots at each stop. The route covers approximately 300 kilometers and includes Thingvellir National Park, GULLFOSS waterfall, and the Geyser geothermal area, with the combination representing Iceland's tectonic, glacial, and volcanic processes in locations accessible from the capital without requiring the multi-day road trips that the more remote attractions demand. The name Golden Circle is modern tourism branding rather than historical designation, having been created by travel companies in the late 20th century to package Iceland's attractions for cruise ship passengers and short-stay visitors who want highlights without committing to the full ring road circuit that circles the entire island. Thingvellir National Park. The national park sits in the Rift Valley, where the North American and Eurasian tectonic plates are separating. With the Almanam-Jar Canyon being the visible expression of the rift, whose walls represent the edges of continents pulling apart at a rate that is imperceptible in human timescales, but dramatic in geological terms. The site is UNESCO listed for both natural and cultural reasons. As the Althing Parliament was established here in 930 CE, making it one of the world's oldest continuous parliaments. And the reason Iceland considers Thingvellir the spiritual heart of the nation, despite the capital being located elsewhere. The Silfra fissure in the park allows divers to swim between tectonic plates in water so clear that visibility exceeds 100 meters. With the clarity resulting from glacial meltwater being filtered through porous lava rock for decades before emerging in the fissure to create conditions that are among the best for cold water diving anywhere in the world. GULLFOSS. The waterfall on the Vitar River plunges 32 meters in 2 stages, with the upper fall being 11 meters and the lower being 21 meters. And the combined drop creates a canyon whose mist rises high enough to produce rainbows on sunny days when the afternoon light hits the spray at the right angle. The waterfall was nearly destroyed for a hydroelectric project in the early 20th century. But the farmer's daughter, Sigridur Tómasdóttir, threatened to throw herself into the falls if the project proceeded. And her protest helped save the waterfall while making her an early environmental activist whose determination preserved what is now Iceland's most visited natural attraction. The viewing platforms allow close approaches to the falls where the spray soaks visitors who venture too near. And the roar of the water makes conversation impossible at the lower viewpoint, creating a sensory experience that is as powerful as the visual impact of watching 12,000 liters per second pour over the edge during summer melt season. GEYSIR geothermal area. The geothermal field contains the original geyser from which all geysers worldwide take their name. Though the namesake has been dormant for decades, while the nearby Strokka erupts every 5 to 10 minutes. As shooting water 20 to 30 meters into the air in eruptions that are predictable enough to plan photographs around, but variable enough to catch unprepared visitors when the column shoots higher than expected. The geothermal activity is driven by magma beneath the surface that heats groundwater to boiling point and beyond. With the pressure building until it forces the superheated water through the surface in explosive releases that create the fountains tourists gather around in crowds numbering in the thousands during summer peak season. The area contains multiple hot springs, mud pots, and steam vents. And the ground is dangerously hot in places where warning signs are genuinely necessary to prevent visitors from stepping on crust that appears solid but is actually thin enough to break under weight and send feet into boiling water that causes serious burns requiring immediate medical attention. Seljalandsfoss. The waterfall drops 60 meters from the cliff where the Seljalands River plunges over the edge of the former coastline. And the path behind the falls allows visitors to walk completely around the cascade in an experience that is unique in Iceland and rare globally. Though the path becomes icy and dangerous in winter when spray freezes on the rocks and creates conditions that require crampons and extreme caution. The cliff itself represents the ancient shoreline from when sea levels were higher after the last ice age. With the land having risen through post-glacial rebound while erosion carved the falls into their current form, making the geological processes visible in the layers of volcanic rock that form the cliff face. The falls are photogenic from every angle, but particularly striking from behind, looking out through the falling water toward the lowlands extending to the current coast. A perspective that is popular with photographers who arrive at sunrise when the light is warm. And the tour buses haven't yet delivered their passengers to crowd the narrow path. Skógafoss is one of Iceland's largest waterfalls, with a 60-meter drop and a 25-meter width that together create a wall of water generating so much spray that rainbows are nearly constant on sunny days. And while the mist rises high enough to be visible for kilometers and soaks anyone who approaches the base of the falls. The waterfall sits on the site of Iceland's former coastline, with the cliffs extending east and west, marking where the sea reached before the land rose and the coast retreated several kilometers south to its current position in a geological uplift that continues to add several millimeters of elevation every year. The stairs beside the falls climb to the top of the cliff in an ascent that is steep and exposed. but rewards those who make it with views across the coastal plain to the modern shoreline and inland toward the glaciers that feed the Skåga River. Offering a perspective that reveals the true scale of the landscape in ways that photographs from ground level simply cannot convey. Reynisfjara, Black Sand Beach. The Black Sand Beach near Vik is formed from basalt lava that has been shattered by waves and ground into sand over millennia. And the beach is dangerous despite its beauty because sneaker waves arrive without warning and have killed multiple tourists who turned their backs to the sea. The warning signs are genuinely necessary because the North Atlantic conditions create wave patterns that are unpredictable and powerful enough to knock people down and drag them into water cold enough to cause death from hypothermia within minutes. The Reynisfjara sea stacks rise from the ocean off the beach as basalt columns that, according to folklore, are the remains of trolls turned to stone by the sunrise. Though the scientific explanation of erosion-resistant basalt standing after the surrounding rock has worn away is less romantic, but equally remarkable given the forces required to carve stone into shapes that appear almost architectural in their geometry. Vik, the southernmost village on Iceland's mainland, sits beneath glaciers and volcanoes with a population of approximately 300 people who live in a location that would be evacuated immediately if Katla volcano erupts beneath the Mýrdalsjökull Glacier. The evacuation plans are rehearsed regularly because the eruption is not a question of if, but when. With the intervals between eruptions averaging 40 to 80 years, and the last major eruption having occurred in 1918. Making the next one statistically overdue by any reasonable calculation. And the village serves as a service stop for tourists traveling the south coast, with hotels, restaurants, and gas stations supporting the ring road traffic that passes through year-round in an economy that has become entirely dependent on tourism since the fishing industry that once dominated has declined to minimal levels. The church sits on a hill above the village with views across the black sand beach and the sea stacks, and its elevated position was deliberately chosen to provide refuge in case of Jökulsárlón glacial outburst flood that would result from a volcanic eruption melting the ice above. Jökulsárlón Glacier Lagoon. The glacial lagoon, formed in the 20th century as the breathtaking Glacier retreated from the coast. and creating a lake that filled with icebergs, carving from the glacier tongue and drifting toward the sea through a narrow channel. With the icebergs ranging from small fragments to blocks the size of buildings that take days to melt even in summer. The water is a mixture of glacial meltwater and seawater, where seals swim among the icebergs, hunting for fish. And the animals are remarkably tolerant of the boat tours that operate during summer months, taking passengers close to the ice. The lagoon is expanding as the glacier continues to retreat at an accelerating rate. With the tongue having withdrawn several kilometers since the lagoon first formed. And the continued retreat is visible year by year as the ice edge moves further back. In a demonstration of climate change impacts that are more obvious here than in most places on Earth. To Diamond Beach. The beach beside Jökulsárlón is where icebergs wash up after passing through the channel. Creating a scene of ice fragments scattered across black sand with the contrast between the white and blue ice and the dark basalt, creating photographic conditions that attract photographers willing to wade into the surf for close-range shots, despite the dangers of sneaker waves and undertow. The icebergs that reach the beach are typically smaller than those in the lagoon because they have been broken down by waves and melted by the warmer ocean water. But the translucent blue ice catches light in ways that make even small fragments visually striking when backlit by sunrise or sunset. The beach is dynamic and changes with every tide, with the pieces that photographers carefully compose their shots around being gone within hours as they melt or wash back into the sea. Making every visit unique and making return visits worthwhile, even for those who have photographed the location before. VATNAJÖKULL National Park. VATNAJÖKULL National Park covers 14% of Iceland's land area, making it one of Europe's largest national parks. With the VATNAJÖKULL ice cap at its center being Europe's largest glacier by volume at approximately 3,000 cubic kilometers of ice. The park encompasses diverse landscapes, including the SKAFTAFELL area in the south, with its birch forests and glacial valleys, the Jökulsárlón glacial lagoon along the coast, and the volcanic desert of Askja in the north. With this variety reflecting the geological processes that created Iceland through volcanic eruptions and glacial erosion operating simultaneously. The park protects both natural and cultural heritage, with historical sites including turf houses and the remains of farms that were abandoned after volcanic eruptions covered the land in ash. And the ruins demonstrate the challenges of living in a landscape where the ground can literally explode beneath you. And the next growing season can be cancelled by volcanic fallout. SKAFTAFELL, the area within VATNAJÖKULL National Park, was historically an independent farm, and later a separate national park before being incorporated into the larger VATNAJÖKULL Park in 2008. With the landscape being characterized by glacial valleys, outlet glaciers descending from the ice cap, and birch forests that are unusual in an Iceland where most of the country was deforested by Norse settlers and their sheep. The Skógafoss waterfall drops over a cliff of hexagonal basalt columns that inspired the architecture of Hallgrímskirkja in Reykjavik. With the columns having been formed when lava cooled slowly and fractured into geometric shapes that appear almost artificial in their regularity. The hiking trails in SKAFTAFELL range from easy loops suitable for cruise ship passengers on shore excursions to demanding glacier hikes requiring ice axes and crampons. And this variety makes the area accessible to visitors with different fitness levels, while still offering genuine wilderness for those willing to commit to the longer routes. The canyon carved by the Fjaðrar River extends approximately 2 kilometers with walls up to 100 meters high. And the erosion has created meanders in the bedrock that make the canyon exceptionally photogenic from the rim trail that follows the edge. The canyon was formed over 2 million years as the river cut through layers of volcanic rock and sediment. With the process being accelerated during glacial periods when meltwater volumes were higher and erosion rates increased dramatically. The canyon became internationally famous after Justin Bieber filmed a music video here in 2015. And the resulting tourist influx caused environmental damage serious enough that the canyon was closed for 2 years to allow vegetation to recover from trampling. With the closure demonstrating how social media fame can destroy the very places it promotes by creating visitor numbers that exceed what fragile environments can sustain without degradation. The wreck of a US Navy DC-3 that crashed on the Black Sand Beach in 1973 sits 3 kilometers from the ring road and is accessible only by walking across flat volcanic sand that offers no shelter from wind, that frequently reaches gale force, making the return journey of 6 kilometers feel considerably longer when walking into headwind that makes forward progress genuinely difficult. The crew survived the crash, and the wreck was left in place rather than being recovered, allowing the aluminum fuselage to be gradually worn by wind-blown sand and increasingly covered in graffiti by visitors who ignore the requests to treat the site with respect. The wreck became an Instagram phenomenon in the mid-2000s, and the resulting visitor numbers caused the landowner to close vehicle access and require the walk that now filters out casual visitors while preserving access for those willing to make the effort, creating a balance that is imperfect but better than allowing vehicle traffic to destroy the fragile desert pavement. Blue Lagoon, the geothermal spa, is Iceland's most visited attraction, with silica-rich water from the nearby Svartsengi geothermal power plant. Being channeled into a constructed lagoon where the temperature is maintained at around 38 degrees Celsius year-round. Creating conditions that are comfortable for bathing even when air temperatures are below freezing and snow is falling on bathers' heads. The lagoon is entirely artificial and was created as a byproduct of the power plant that generates electricity and provides hot water to the surrounding area. Though the mineral content of the water and its pale blue color create an aesthetic that appears natural to visitors unaware of the engineering that maintains everything behind the scenes. The entrance fees have escalated over the years to the point where basic admission exceeds €100 during peak season. And premium packages offering private changing facilities, silica mud masks, and in-water bars reach prices that make the Blue Lagoon one of the most expensive tourist attractions in Europe relative to the time spent there. SNÆFELLSNES Peninsula, the peninsula, extending from western Iceland into the Atlantic, is often called Iceland in miniature because it contains within its boundaries most of the landscape types found elsewhere in the country. With black sand beaches, basalt cliffs, lava fields, waterfalls, glaciers, and fishing villages, all compressed into an area that can be driven in a single day. The Snæfellsjökull Glacier at the peninsula's western tip is a stratovolcano whose summit was featured in Jules Verne's Journey to the Center of the Earth as the entrance to the subterranean world. And the literary fame was based on the mountain's dramatic profile and the legends that surrounded it long before Verne wrote his novel. The southern coast faces the open Atlantic with cliffs and sea stacks that receive the full force of the ocean's swells. While the northern coast is more sheltered with gentler beaches, and the small towns where most of the peninsula's population lives in communities still dependent on fishing, despite the growth of tourism. KIRKJUFELL, the mountain on the north coast of SNÆFELLSNES, is Iceland's most photographed mountain, with its distinctive shape making it immediately recognizable, and the nearby Jökulsárlón waterfall providing foreground for compositions that appear on tourism materials, calendars, and the social media feeds of every photographer who visits Iceland. The mountain is relatively small at 463 meters, but its isolated position and the symmetrical profile created by glacial erosion make it visually striking from the common viewpoint beside the ring road. Though hikers who climb to the summit find that the views across Reynisfjara Bay are the real reward rather than the mountain itself. The popularity has created a tragedy of the common situation where dozens of photographers compete for the same shooting positions, particularly at sunrise and during winter when the northern lights appear above the mountain. And the crowding diminishes the experience for everyone present, even though the alternative of limiting access remains politically difficult to implement. ARNARSTAPI, the small village on SNÆFELLSNES' southern coast, is a former fishing station that has transitioned to being a tourist stop, with the harbor, the cliffs, and the coastal walking trails attracting visitors who arrive on day trips from Reykjavik or as part of the broader SNÆFELLSNES circuit. And the basalt arch Gatkletta at the shoreline and the stone sculpture of Bardur Snæfellsas, a half-man, half-troll figure from the Icelandic sagas, provide photo opportunities that keep visitors in the village for about an hour before they continue to the next attraction on their itinerary. The cliffs serve as nesting sites for Arctic terns and other seabirds during summer. And the terns are aggressively territorial, dive-bombing anyone who walks too close to their nests in attacks that are mostly show, but occasionally make contact with enough force to draw blood from unprotected heads, making hats advisable when walking the coastal trail during nesting season. Dur, the black pebble beach on SNÆFELLSNES' western coast, is scattered with rusted wreckage from the British trawler Epine GY7 that wrecked here in 1948, and killed all 14 crew members, and the remnants have been left as a memorial rather than being cleared. Because the tragedy is remembered through the rusted metal that emerges from the black stones. The beach is also the site of 4 lifting stones that were used historically by fishermen to test their strength. With the stones weighing from 23 to 154 kilograms, and the tradition held that fishermen needed to lift at least the half-Drettinger stone to qualify for work on fishing boats, where physical strength was essential for survival at sea. The beach itself is composed of smooth black pebbles rather than sand, with the stones having been worn round by centuries of wave action and being pleasant to walk on despite the tragic history that the wreckage scattered among them represents. "20 places across an island where the Earth's bones show through." If you're seeing Iceland beyond the Instagram shots, subscribe to Passport Unfolded, because 20 more destinations await where fire and ice continue their eternal battle. Akureyri. The northern capital contains 18,000 people, making it Iceland's second largest urban area after Reykjavik. And the town sits at the head of Eyjafjörður fjord, surrounded by mountains that create a microclimate slightly warmer and drier than would be expected at this latitude. The town functions as the service center for northern Iceland, with the university, hospital, and commercial activity supporting a region that includes the MÝVATN area, the Tröllaskagi Peninsula, and the villages scattered along the coast in both directions. The botanical garden at the southern edge of town grows plants from around the world at latitude 65 degrees north. Demonstrating that with sufficient care and the shelter provided by the fjord walls, even species from much warmer climates can survive the Icelandic growing season that extends from May through September, with continuous daylight compensating somewhat for the cool temperatures. The ski area above town operates from November through May, with floodlit skiing available during the dark months when daylight is limited to just a few hours around midday. The Lake MÝVATN, the shallow lake in northern Iceland, formed when a lava dam blocked the river approximately 2,300 years ago. And the current landscape has been shaped by volcanic activity that continued into the 18th century. With the Krafla fires from 1724 to 1729, creating new lava fields that are still largely unvegetated and appear as if they could have erupted yesterday rather than nearly 3 centuries ago. The lake area is an important bird-watching destination, particularly for ducks. With 13 species breeding around the lake in numbers that make it one of the most significant waterfowl areas in Europe. Though the name MYVATN translates to Midge Lake and reflects the enormous swarms of insects that emerge in summer, and can make outdoor activities unpleasant despite being harmless to humans and essential to the ecosystem that supports the bird populations. The geothermal activity around the lake includes mud pots, steam vents, and the MYVATN nature baths. Which offer a smaller and less expensive alternative to the Blue Lagoon with similar geothermal bathing in naturally heated water rich in minerals. DETTIFOSS, the waterfall in VATNAJÖKULL National Park, is Europe's most powerful by volume. With the Jökulsárlón river dropping 44 meters at an average flow rate of 193 cubic meters per second. Creating a roar that is audible for kilometers and vibrations that can be felt through the bedrock when standing near the viewing platform. The waterfall sits in a canyon carved through basalt layers. And the erosion works upstream at a rate of approximately 1 centimeter per year as the falling water undermines the rock at the lip. Meaning the falls have retreated several hundred meters since the end of the last ice age and will continue to migrate upstream for as long as the river flows. The waterfall is accessible from both the east and west sides of the canyon, with the east side road being paved while the west side requires driving on gravel. And although the east side is more popular, the west side provides the better views, including the perspective that shows the full width and power of the falls. GEOTHERMAL, the waterfall of the gods, is named for the event in the year 999 or 1000 when the law speaker Thorgeir Ljósvetningagoði, after mediating the conflict between pagans and Christians at the Althing, threw his idols of the Norse gods into the falls to demonstrate Iceland's official conversion to Christianity. Though private worship of the old gods remained legal in a compromise that was characteristic of Icelandic pragmatism. The waterfall is horseshoe-shaped and drops 12 meters over a width of 30 meters, with the volume being considerably less than DETTIFOSS, but the accessibility being better and the symmetry making it more photogenic. From the viewing platforms that allow close approaches to the falling water. The falls are located on the ring road between AKUREYRI and MYVATN. making them a convenient stop that requires minimal deviation from the main route. Though the ease of access also means they are heavily visited during summer, when tour buses arrive in numbers that overwhelm the parking area and create crowds on the viewing platforms. Húsavík, the town on the north coast, is Iceland's whale-watching capital, with the bay providing feeding grounds for humpback whales, minke whales, white-beaked dolphins, and harbour porpoises that are present from April through October. And peak sightings occur in June and July when the midnight sun allows evening tours that operate under continuous daylight. The whale-watching industry in Húsavík developed directly from the whaling industry that operated here until 1986. With the transition from killing whales to watching them being an economic necessity that became environmentally beneficial, though the ethics of wildlife tourism remain debated as the boat's presence inevitably disturbs the animals, even when operators follow guidelines designed to minimize impact. The Whale Museum in the town centre displays skeletons and provides information about the species found in Icelandic waters. With the exhibits explaining both the natural history and the whaling history that shaped Iceland's relationship with these animals, from subsistence hunting through commercial whaling to contemporary conservation and tourism. Westfjords. The peninsula in northwestern Iceland is the least visited region in the country due to its remoteness from Reykjavik and the lack of ring road connection. With access requiring either flying to Ísafjörður or driving long distances on gravel roads that are often closed by snow from October through May. The landscape is dramatic, with steep mountains dropping directly to the sea, fjords cutting deep into the land, and coastal cliffs providing nesting sites for millions of seabirds during summer when the constant daylight supports intensive feeding to raise the next generation. The region's population has declined steadily since the mid-20th century as people move to Reykjavik and Akureyri for education and employment opportunities that the small Westfjords towns cannot provide. With villages that once supported hundreds, now having populations counted in dozens, as the demographic decline, typical of rural Iceland, hits hardest in the regions furthest from the capital. Undinjandi Waterfall. The waterfall in the Westfjords cascades down a mountainside in a series of 7 separate falls totaling 100 meters. with the uppermost Dinjandi section being the most spectacular as the water spreads from 30 meters wide at the top to 60 meters at the bottom in a shape that appears almost architectural in its symmetry. The waterfall is the most famous attraction in the West Fjords and worth the detour from the main road. With the parking area at the bottom of the valley and the walk to the upper falls taking approximately 20 minutes through landscape that includes all 7 sections of the cascade system. The falls are fed by glacier melt and rainfall, with the volume varying seasonally. Being highest during summer when the snow melts, and lowest in winter when much of the catchment is frozen. Though even at low flow, the falls remain beautiful, and the surrounding landscape of steep mountains and green valleys provides context that makes the visit memorable regardless of the water volume. Ísafjörður, the largest town in the West Fjords, has a population of approximately 2,600 people, making it tiny by international standards. But functioning as the regional center for an area larger than many European countries. With the hospital, schools, and essential services supporting communities scattered across the peninsula. The town sits on a spit of land in Jökulsárlón fjord, surrounded by mountains that rise directly from the water and create avalanche risk severe enough that protective barriers have been built above the town to deflect snowslides. It's with the defenses being tested regularly during heavy snowfall, when avalanches occur frequently enough to be considered a normal part of winter life. The old town contains wooden houses from the 18th and 19th centuries, when Ísafjörður was a major fishing station. And the structures have been preserved and now house museums, restaurants, and guest houses that serve the modest tourist trade arriving during summer months. When the region is accessible by road and the midnight sun allows extended daylight for hiking and sightseeing. Iceland is not the Iceland that Instagram shows, because while the waterfalls are real, the glaciers are genuine, and the northern lights are extraordinary when they appear, the wind is relentless, the rain is constant, the prices are absurd, and the crowds at famous locations are sufficient to make you question whether the experience was worth the effort and expense. Yet the geology is genuinely remarkable. The landscapes are unlike anywhere else on Earth. And the privilege of watching a planet actively creating itself through volcanic eruptions and tectonic processes makes Iceland worthy of its reputation, despite the gap between expectation and reality that every visitor experiences. Subscribe to Passport Unfolded for journeys through places as they actually are, rather than as marketing wants them to be. 40 locations across Iceland, from Reykjavik to the highlands, from black sand beaches to ice caves, from waterfalls to volcanoes, all real, all remarkable, all complicated.